see. Good evening. This is Satan's Trilogy. I'm reading Book 3, Chapter 3, and this is reading 86. I am the author and the narrator. Sit back, relax, and let the story unfold. The restaurant had less than a half hour to clean up and prepare for the general public. People were already lining up at the 7 o'clock opening. A photographer had been taking photos of the girls since they arrived. Mr. Pelerzi Jr. asked for a group photo to be taken with everyone in front of the store. Miss Strong, obviously willing to comply, the entire evening had been provided free by the restaurant. The photographer climbed to the top of a very tall stepladder and took a photo of all the girls crowded into a tight circle with Miss Strong and the Pelerzis in the center. Everyone looked up at the photographer and smiled. The bus ride home was a lot quieter. Everyone was full from eating some of the best food they had ever experienced. Arriving at the school, Miss Strong spoke to the girls before they left the bus. Everyone, please listen. I need all of you here tomorrow morning before 10 o'clock. Depending on traffic, it can take an hour to get to the race grounds. We want to be there early. Miss Strong paused a moment, then added, please, everyone that needs a ride home, please stay close to the bus, and we will arrange a ride home for you. Esther and Day took 4 girls home, including Amy. All of the girls were excited and perhaps getting a second wind with this new experience of riding in Esther's Escalade. One of the girls asked why she had the Escalade when she owned that awesome Mustang. Well, started Esther, the Mustang doesn't hold many people, and certainly those in the back seat have little room. So my cousin made me a great deal on this car. It's like new, but had 60,000 miles on it when I bought it. Day and I have some tall friends that really appreciate being in a large car. At that moment, Day pulled the car into a large parking lot for some subsidized housing. The Collins complex offered low-income people 2- and 3-bedroom apartments at affordable prices. There were 180 families living in 3 tall buildings, with 6 families on each floor. The staff did a great job of maintaining the complex, and there was a long waiting list of people wanting to get in. Esther spoke up. Terry, this is your stop. Terry was undoing her seatbelt and climbing forward with the back seat. From the back seat, her blonde hair kept falling in front of her eyes as she came forward. It's not too late. Does anyone want to see where I live? Terry seemed a bit hesitant and perhaps hopeful at the same time. Esther glanced at Day and got a quick nod of approval. Terry, I would love to see your home unless someone here has a real need to get back to their home immediately. The other 3 girls chuckled. No, I am free for the night, said the first girl. The others all repeated similar responses. Well then, said Esther, let's spend some time with Terry. Everyone took the elevator up to the 6th floor, where Terry led them to the last door on the floor. On the door, the numbers 613 were visible. Terry stopped at the door and hesitated. She turned to Esther and the others and said, "You know, this might have been a bad idea. If my mother's boyfriend is here," Terry stopped for a moment, "well, he can be a bit crude." Esther smiled at Terry. "How old are you, Terry?" Terry seemed puzzled because this had nothing to do with what she had just stated. "I am 18. Esther smiled. "In this state, an 18-year-old is considered a responsible adult. And if you choose to," Esther smiled, "well, you can do anything you want. After all, you are an adult." Esther helped to turn the doorknob to the apartment. As the door opened, the girls all rushed in to check out the surroundings. Simple and a bit unkept, but the apartment was ample for a family of 2 or 3 children, and in this case, there was only Terry. Terry was rushing about, picking up some loose clothes and apologizing at the same time. "We tried to keep things picked up better than this. I guess my mother's boyfriend has been drinking. Jack's a bit hard to handle when he drinks." Terry seemed a bit concerned. "Maybe you should all go." Esther was standing at the window. "Terry, the view here is just wonderful. You can see so many of the downtown buildings from here." Terry stood next to Esther and commented, "It truly is a wonderful view. My mother and I were so happy before she found her new boyfriend." At that moment, from a back room, emerged a very muscular man holding a bottle of beer. "What the hell?" He rubbed his eyes. "Am I dreaming, or did I just hit the jackpot?" Esther turned to Terry and said, "Let me handle this." Esther winked at Terry as she told her to take a seat by the window. Esther walked over to the man and stood in front of him. "What do you mean, jackpot?" Esther wasn't smiling. "Well, if you girls want to party, I have some beer," said Jack. "You are all so hot that I don't know who to start with." Esther stood her ground. "Tell me, Jack, aren't you Terry's mother's boyfriend? She probably wouldn't like you're looking at girls half your age." Jack took a drink from the bottle of beer in his hand. "She keeps her mouth shut. She is such a sorry ass bitch that I do what I want around here, and she watches." Jack took another drink from his beer, then added, "I only stay here for her daughter. Terry has such a nice ass." Esther watched Jack. "Give me 1 minute, Jack. I need to ask Terry something." Esther went to Terry sitting by the window and, looking very uncomfortable, and whispered something into her ear. Terry gave a huge smile, stood up, leaving the room. Esther went back to Jack and said, "I have some bad news for you, Jack." Jack was definitely intoxicated. Fighting to keep his eyes open, he said, "What do you mean?" "Terry is moving out tonight." Esther finally smiled at Jack and added, "And you can't do Jack to stop it." Jack looked about and was puzzled by Esther's confidence and her certainty. He moved a step towards the couch and collapsed onto the end of the couch. He thought for a moment. "She can't leave. The police will bring her back. She's a child." Esther sat on the coffee table in front of the couch and said to Jack, "You are wrong. Terry is 18, and she can do anything that she wishes." Esther was sickened by Jack's appearance and his behavior. "Jack," said Esther, "you have been drinking, but you need to remember this. Terry is my friend, and if ever you make contact with her again, even to say hi, I will put you into a lot of pain." Esther looked at Jack. Don't be stupid, Jack. Day and Terry came out from a back room holding clothes and shoes. Day spoke up. This is everything, Esther. Day had a big grin on her face. She loved it when Esther helped others. Go to the car and then drive to the front door to pick me up, said Esther. Jack and I have just a few things left to discuss. Day and Terry followed the other girls out of the apartment, going straight to the car, then followed Esther's instructions to the last letter. Esther was alone with Jack, and she stared him straight on. Once the girls left the apartment, Jack, we are alone. If you are thinking anything sick and distorted, you should forget it. Esther smiled. Terry is my friend, and I want you to forget that you ever knew her. Jack stood up and walked over to Esther. He looked at her. He studied her from foot to head, and then he stared into her eyes. Jack twisted his head to crack his tight neck and loosen some tension. Esther didn't seem to show any fear, and to the contrary, she seemed to own the moment. Esther, said Jack, you ever been in the military? This was a strange question to ask an 18-year-old girl, yet he saw something in her that he had witnessed himself during 6 years of serving the country. I grew up military, said Esther. My father was Special Forces, and he kept me close. Jack stood in front of Esther, gazing, as if he was saying something from the past, a memory that perhaps had been forgotten. You have seen a lot, said Jack. How were you able to handle it? Jack's composure had changed, and he now was searching for answers. I have seen real evil, and it saddens me, but I have felt love, dedication, and sacrifice from others that tips the balance towards good. Esther smiled. Think of all the little things in life, then think of the really big, wonderful things in life, and don't let evil dominate your thoughts. Esther smiled. She now understood Jack to be a victim of the world's horrors, and only Jack could change that. Esther decided to leave and opened the door. Good luck, Jack. Jack had turned his eyes to a mirror on the wall and was staring at himself. Without turning his head, Jack said, Thanks, Esther. The Escalade was at the front of the building as Esther had asked. Opening the front passenger door, Esther jumped in, acting as if nothing had happened. Esther asked, Who do we drop off next? Two girls spoke quickly. Both were saying there was no rush for them and that the other girl could go home first. Esther smiled at Day, and immediately Day knew the night was evolving into something slightly different. Esther turned to the girls, Caitlin, Sasha, Rita, and Amy were yet to be dropped off. I would love to see everyone's home, but if anyone is interested, you are all invited to stay at my apartment tonight. Immediately, everyone answered with enthusiasm and wanted to join the stayover. Awesome, said Esther. Day, let's drop by Lee's dry cleaners and see if my cousin, Mr. Wee, can clean Terry's clothes tonight. It looks like they became wrinkled when we grabbed them. They made a quick turn to the left, went 2 blocks, then turned north on Taft Street. In a few blocks, they pulled in front of Lee's dry cleaners. and parked the car along the curb. "Let's everyone go in." Esther jumped out and stood alongside of the Escalade to help everyone out. "Terry, you need wrinkle-free clothes, and my cousin Wee will give me the family discount. He is a really great man." Esther seemed slightly boastful, but she couldn't help it. Esther admired hardworking people with dedication towards the future. Day and Terry held the majority of the clothes, but Amy and Sasha had picked up some that had fallen from their arms. Everyone walked into the cleaners, excited to be there. They all seemed amazed at Esther having family running a dry cleaners. All 7 girls were seniors, 18 years of age or nearly so. Mr. Wee came out from the back and quickly recognized Esther, despite her still having a black wig on. Speaking in Chinese, he greeted Esther with great enthusiasm, and he then said in English, "Day, it is so good to see you with your sister." Mr. Wee took a look at the 5 other girls and welcomed them too. "Esther, are you all in a club?" said Mr. Wee as his wife joined his side. Greeting Mrs. Wee with a big smile, Esther quickly told Mrs. Wee in Chinese it was wonderful to see her again. Then Esther smiled and answered Mr. Wee's question. "You might say we are in a club. We are all runners from the 6th hour girls' physical education class at Grant High." Then Esther added, "Tomorrow, the entire class of 60 girls will run in the state's cross-country championship." "That is wonderful," said Mr. Wee. "All of you girls look really fit. I wish all of you great luck tomorrow." Esther smiled and said to Mr. Wee, "I think that we have a real chance of winning tomorrow's race, but tonight, one of our friends needs her clothes cleaned. Will it be possible to pick them up tomorrow afternoon?" Mr. Wee smiled and started to examine the clothes on the counter where the girls had placed them. "Esther, I will start these right away, in case you find yourself awake later and you would like to pick them up sooner. Should be no more than 90 minutes. Esther chuckled. "Mr. Wee, you seem to know my habits." Esther turned to Terry, standing slightly behind her on the right, and pulled her forward ever so slightly. "The clothes belong to Terry. She will be living with me for a while." Mr. Wee spoke to Terry. "Hello, Terry. I'm glad to meet you. Do not worry about your clothes. My wife and I will take good care of them." Mrs. Wee had tagged the clothes and handed her husband the ticket stubs for each piece of clothing. Mr. Wee placed the stubs into a large stapler that stapled them together. Handing the stubs to Esther, Mr. Wee said, "Good luck again tomorrow." Esther smiled, took the stubs, and said in Chinese, "Thank you for taking such good care of my friend's clothes." Esther turned to leave, and everyone followed her lead as Esther turned back to Mr. Wee and said in Chinese, "Have a wonderful evening, Mr. and Mrs. Wee." The girls jumped into the Escalade and were asking a lot of questions. Esther smiled and said, "Wait a minute. Let's decide where to go next." Caitlin spoke up. "I live close by, 3 blocks down, and take a right." They took off saying, "That sounds good to me." In less than a few minutes, the girls pulled in front of a large older home that was converted into a duplex. Caitlin lived with her mother and father in the upstairs apartment. The girls all jumped out and followed Caitlin. She was excited. Caitlin had never had so many girls come to her home before. She unlocked one of 2 front doors and said, "Follow me, please." The stairs were slightly steep, but at the top of the stairs was a wide landing that allowed you to go either to your right or left. Caitlin looked to her right, where her mother and father were waiting for her. Caitlin moved quickly to her parents, gave them both a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Quickly making her introductions to her parents, all of these girls are in my 6th-hour physical education class. This is Day, Amy, Sasha, Rita, Terry, and Esther. Then Caitlin added, Day and Esther are 2 of the fastest girls in our class. Caitlin's father was perhaps 5'10", and her mother slightly shorter. Both parents smiled and welcomed the girls into their home. Caitlin's father showed some concern about Caitlin staying overnight with someone he didn't know well. Mr. Bissett was French, and his wife was from Belgium. They had arrived in the United States over 20 years ago. Mr. Bissett looked at his wife and whispered in French, I really wish our daughter would not leave tonight. Mrs. Bissett responded in French, She is 18 years old and needs to find friends her own age. We have to let her live her life. Esther smiled at the concerned parents and spoke to them in French. Caitlin is safe with me. Mr. Bissett was surprised. You speak French? Esther smiled, and while hugging Caitlin from the side, she explained in French. Of course, I grew up speaking French. Once I spent an entire week in Périgord learning about black truffles. Esther was boasting slightly about her time in France. Mr. Bissett immediately seemed more relaxed. He studied Esther for a moment, then glanced at the other girls, and then he smiled at Caitlin. Do you need to take anything? He asked. Caitlin was ecstatic. She jumped up and down for a moment, then kissed her father on the cheek and ran off to the bedroom, proclaiming that she only needed a few items. Esther smiled and said, Your daughter is a big part of our team. She runs very hard, and I believe that she will do very well tomorrow. Will you be there cheering for Caitlin and the Grant High runners? Asked Esther. Mr. Bissett hesitated for whatever reason, then said, My wife and I will be there cheering for the entire 6th-hour girls team, and of course Caitlin. At that moment, Caitlin returned with a big bag, excited to be leaving with the rest of the girls. Mr. and Mrs. Bissett both hugged their daughter and told her how much they loved her. Then said have fun, and Caitlin left with her friends. Back to the Escalade, as everyone piled back in, Sasha spoke up. This is so exciting to see where we all live. My home is just down the road. Day said, Then you're next. What's the address? I think I'll stop there. That was reading 86, and I hope you enjoyed it. So until next time, be safe and take care. Thank you for watching.